So the question then becomes, what is it about Matthew Perry that has led him to this type of chronic substance abuse? Matthew Perry's life is a great example of someone who had all types of capital, and he had an abundance of all types of capital except the most important type of capital, which is personal capital. All the money in the world and all the friends in the world are meaningless, as we can see by the life of Matthew Perry, without personal capital. Acceptance and feeling like you exist and true self-worth, okay, and only comes from an abundance of personal capital. In fact, his comedic style signifies high cultural capital by his ability to read the room and obviously present jokes. So he had high cultural capital, but what he was lacking is personal capital, and he lacked self-love. He lacked self-worth. Okay? One of the affirmations that I recommend in the book is I am enough.
Of feeling like I wasn't enough, feeling like I was needy, feeling like I didn't matter.
Be able to look at yourself and say, I am enough right now. And that's something I wish Matthew Perry could have practiced a little bit more and really owned it and said, I am enough. And welcome to another episode of the Good Problems Podcast, where we discuss the pursuit of happiness and best practices for living a happier life. In today's episode, we are going to discuss the true cause of Matthew Perry's struggles and the lessons that we can learn about wealth and happiness from his life. Now, as we all know, Matthew Perry is one of the most successful television actors in recent history, and he has had a very public struggle with addiction and depression. And a lot of people have been kind of providing opinions on what potentially was the cause of Matthew Perry's struggles. Some people, for example, say that he was feeling lonely. He was feeling lonely, and there's a loneliness epidemic happening in the younger generation, and that he was unmarried, he didn't have children, and that this caused or this led to his struggles. Other people just clearly just blame alcohol and drug abuse, and that they essentially, their opinion is that, you know, the solution to his struggles or the suggestions they provide is to stay away from alcohol and stay away from drugs, because this is the kind of spiral that you can get into. But none of those are really the true cause of Matthew Perry's problems. Now, Matthew Perry, again, he is wealthy. He was wealthy. He's good looking. He is funny. He is, and he's dated some of the, most beautiful women in Hollywood and probably outside of Hollywood. So the question then becomes, what is it about Matthew Perry that has led him to this type of chronic substance abuse? And as you can see from his comments clearly in his book and some of his interviews, Matthew Perry lacked a sense of self-worth. He lacked self-love.
Of feeling like I wasn't enough, feeling like I was needy, feeling like I didn't matter.
As I discussed in the book, wealth consists of 5 types of capital. You have financial capital, you have intellectual capital, you have social capital, you have cultural capital, and then the most important one, personal capital. Okay? And Matthew Perry, no doubt, had tremendous financial capital, right? Reports say that he was earning over $20 million a year in royalties by doing nothing, based on his appearances in the TV sitcom Friends. So he had more than an abundance of financial capital, okay? He's also a well-recognized Hollywood star and had friends, famous and otherwise, and powerful friends that, that he could call and, have relationships with. And he had a very robust social circle. So he had an abundance of social capital too. And between those two, if you're lacking in intellectual capital, which means that something that you don't know, if you have enough money or you have enough friends, you can get consultation and then you can increase your intellectual capital. So he certainly didn't have a lack of access to intellectual capital either. And cultural capital, which is the ability to be aware of yourself and to be aware of your surroundings, that's also another thing that Mathew Perry had well. In fact, his comedic style signifies high cultural capital by his ability to read the room and obviously present jokes. So he had high cultural capital. But what he was lacking is personal capital. As I discuss in the book, Good Problems to Have, personal capital is how much you know yourself and how much you love yourself. It's basically how much self-love you have. And the formula for self-love, as we've discussed in previous videos, is first, self-awareness, which means the lack of denial. Secondly, self-acceptance, which means you're not perfect and you accept your flaws. And those two always lead to self-love. And unfortunately, Mathew Perry never was able to practice this with a high degree of effectiveness, and he lacked self-love. He lacked self-worth. Okay? One of the affirmations that I recommend in the book is I am enough. You are enough right now as you are right now. Of course, we all want to get better and better every day, and we all do get better and better every day. But you're still enough right now, okay? You're enough as is right now. You have self-worth. You have value. You are lovable. You don't need to wait until you get married or get that house or pass a test or get a job or have a certain amount of money in your bank account. You don't have to wait for any of those things to be lovable and have self-worth and to be able to look at yourself and say, I am enough right now. And that's something I wish Mathew Perry could have practiced a little bit more and really owned it and said, I am enough. That's what he lacked. He lacked personal capital. And not all the money in the world and all the friends in the world are meaningless, as we can see by the life of Mathew Perry, without personal capital. Personal capital is where it's at. I highly recommend you read my chapter 5 on wealth, where I discuss these 5 types of capital, including personal capital. And I think the reason I'm making this video is because Mathew Perry's life is a great example of someone who had all types of capital, and he had an abundance of all types of capital except the most important type of capital, which is personal capital and self-love, self-acceptance. I am enough. He just couldn't say that to himself and believe it. And if you're listening to this, you're well off to practice this very important affirmation and start investing in your own personal capital beyond all other types of capital and start to reap the benefits of true wealth, acceptance, and feeling like you exist, and true self-worth, okay? And only comes from an abundance of personal capital. So let's talk a little bit about what appears to have caused Mathew Perry's lack of self-worth. And this goes to some of the other videos that I've talked about, which is parenting and having children without subscribing, without committing to sacrificing your life. Because when you don't sacrifice your life for your children like you should, your children's world start to crumble. And they start to develop all these types of problems, unhealthy mental thoughts, let's say. And in case of Mathew, he certainly felt a lack of self-worth. Because what? Because his parents got a divorce when he was 1, and they basically lived far apart. And I'm sure that anytime that he was with his mom or his dad, he just didn't feel, he wasn't getting attention. He wasn't getting an affirmation from his parents. His parents were too self-involved in their own divorce and their own lives, probably to give Mathew the requisite amount of attention and love so that he can not develop this feeling of invisibility and lack of self-worth. Because naturally, when you have that, what is it? You're going to do a variety of things to either get attention or you're going to do things to feel different, which is substance abuse. So my advice to anyone who hasn't had children yet is to make sure that you are willing to, and your spouse is willing, or your significant other is willing to sacrifice their life now and even in the event of a divorce for the children. Because if you fail to do that, you're really doing a disservice to your children. And for those that are going through a divorce, remember this kind of oath and commitment that you should make to your children and to put them first. And I'm talking about young children, right? Anywhere from ages of 1, I suppose, to 20, let's say. That when you're if you're going through a divorce, and I understand it's a tough thing to do, put your children first. You need to continue to take a back seat. You're still a parent, and you need to take a back seat to your children's well-being, especially during this tumultuous time. Rather than what most people do, which is get completely self-absorbed, start bad-mouthing their ex just so that they can position themselves to be the noble one or the good one or the person whose fault this was not. And I understand divorce is a very traumatic experience for the people getting divorced. But how you handle it, it can be 1,000,000 times more impactful on your children than on you too. So it's not about what you do, it's about how you do it. Okay? And I think, in my opinion, Mathew's parents really dropped the ball when it comes to their divorce. Now, of course, he may have had other, factors that led to his struggles, right? But the way that his parents handled the divorce and the way that he felt invisible, in his own words, around his parents because they were so self-involved with their own lives, certainly did not help his condition. Okay? We're not going to find out. No one's going to know exactly what the cause is. But this is the lesson learned from Mathew Perry's life, which is that parents are responsible for instilling a sense of self-worth into their children and making sure that that is kind of continued during the child's life. As long as you're their parent, it's kind of your primary job to give your child a sense of self-worth. And if you are someone that's an adult or a child right now and you feel that you're lacking self-worth, then practice that. Read the chapter 2 on happiness, where I discuss the path to self-love, and I give you the 3-step path, the 3-step process to have self-love. No matter what your past is, no matter what's happened to you in the past, you're still lovable. And keep in mind that true wealth includes having an abundance of all types of capital, but the most important type of capital, and the type of capital that I guess no amount of money can truly buy, is personal capital. How much you are aware of yourself and how much you accept yourself and how much you love yourself. So I hope this video can help you or anyone that you know love themselves more and feel more worthy and having a greater sense of self-worth regardless of their past. And I look forward to seeing you guys on the next video.